Hi, and this is Don Smith with West Virginia Press, and today we're talking with Gaylene Miller, State Director for AARP West Virginia. Good afternoon, Gaylene.
Hi, Don.
We appreciate your time. Today, AARP West Virginia released its legislative priorities for this session. It's an impressive list. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what you're looking at this session?
Sure. And as a matter of fact, our number one priority, I believe, is a priority for both the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, and that is access to high-speed internet, or what's being talked about as broadband. And we're interested in making sure that the broadband that is delivered is accessible, is affordable, and is reliable. And there are several proposals that are being considered. And again, as I said, they seem to have bipartisan support. And AARP is offering a couple of additional solutions that we think will help extend broadband, particularly into rural areas. And those two things are one around speed standards and one around the definitions of unserved and underserved. And by making those two additions to the proposals that are being considered, we think will make good bills even better.
And it is so important to get it into the rural areas. And I know that our industry, the newspaper industry, is very interested, is a big supporter of broadband initiatives. And again, the rural areas are very important to everybody. You can't move forward without having everybody included.
Well, and we knew it was important before the pandemic, but since pandemic, it's really shined a bright light on the problem of not being able to connect. And we have to bridge that digital divide.
Among all the other things that it impacts, telemedicine is such a big thing for for all residents, but for our seniors who don't want to make that trip in, but want to be able to talk to their doctor and do those type of things. It's so important.
That's exactly right. So, we talk about fulfilling the promise of telehealth and telemedicine and making sure that folks have access to physicians and specialists if needed from the comfort of their own home.
And unfortunately, we've got quite a ways to go, but it is great that it's everyone's priority. Let's hope, and apologies to our audience. You and I are both in Kanawha County, but there is quite a chance that we could have unstable service or freeze during this interview. So I'll give the audience pre-warning. But Gaylene, that's not your only priority this session. I know that one of the things you always look at is the financial situation of seniors, and especially when it comes to fraud and consumer protection, things like that.
So you're exactly right, Don. Financial exploitation, fraud and abuse are top priorities. And as we close a door, a window opens. The bad guys are really good at what they do, and they really try to take advantage of, in particular, older, more vulnerable West Virginians. And again, during the pandemic, we're dealing with social isolation. And because of that, they're even more susceptible to the scams and frauds. And we're looking at ways to tighten those protections and give them a little more teeth for the enforcement end.
Gaylene, there's another big topic this year in terms of the tax structure in West Virginia and moving taxes from the current income tax model to a sales tax model. I know that several criticisms aimed at the sales tax model is it's unfair to people in fixed income or low income levels. Where are you guys on that bill?
So, interestingly enough, although that was a hallmark of the governor's State of the State address, there hasn't been an actual proposal introduced yet. So we've not seen any of the details. And as we all know, the devil is in the details. So we're eager to put eyes on that piece of legislation, get a critical eye, review it, so that we can then make provide some comment if you could help make stem any what would I want to say? Unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
I think is what we're looking at, and point out where there may be harmful impacts, in particular on folks on fixed incomes or lower incomes.
And that's been the comment that I've heard from almost everybody that addresses this bill. We want to see what it is because we do have some concerns of what the impact could be. So very good.
And without seeing it in writing, we're all just speculating at this point.
Absolutely. One thing that you guys do have a lot of research on and a lot of information, pardon me, is the situation with family caregivers in West Virginia. And you're always an advocate for that. There are so many West Virginians taking care of a family member in some type, and it's you've proven and you have a lot of information on the burden that represents. What type of legislation are you looking at this session, Gaylene?
So we're kind of in defense mode, Don, and making sure that the programs and services that are provided for in the state budget, things that go to the Bureau of Senior Services, for example, or to Medicaid, that provide support services for those family caregivers and their loved ones, that they're protected and maintained. I think that's the biggest issue for us, is making sure that those services remain available for those who need them the most.
Yeah, that has been sort of the other shoe that drops with the tax structure change, is there may be some cuts to services and benefits. So
exactly. So we'll be keeping a really keen eye on the budget as it moves through the process.
And again, those are things that we haven't seen the details yet. So it's a little frightening. Again, we're only in day 7, but
seems like we're halfway through the session.
It does. One of the final things that you mentioned, well, I know that the food security is something you're concerned about, but then I want to get to long-term care services and support. But let's talk. I don't know that a lot of people think about food security in West Virginia. Where are you on food security? What's the situation we're facing?
So again, we know that West Virginia has a lot of food deserts. And I think I want to give a shout out to the Mountaineer Food Bank and Facing Hunger for the yeoman's work they've done over the course of this pandemic, and frankly, over the course of several years, many years. But what we're specifically looking at goes back again to the state budget and the SNAP program. It's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and making sure that in full aid budget, as well as if there's not any changes to eligibility, things that would prevent or provide barriers for folks getting those benefits.
Okay. Again, one of the bills that has moved quickly already is the started out as Senate Bill 3, and now it's Senate Bill 277, and it deals with long-term care services and support. And I know you have been outspoken on the COVID immunity bill, I guess is the more common name for that. Where are we?
Right.
Where are you with that? What can you tell us about that?
Well, obviously, we have some strong opposition to providing blanket immunity for COVID-19 to nursing homes, assisted living facilities, or other residential care facilities. And while I will say that I think our state and our industry response to the pandemic has exceeded that of the rest of the country, tragically, we've still had over 700 people, nursing home residents and staff, die from COVID. And so, during the pandemic, there have been the nursing home inspections have been prohibited or suspended. We know that in-family visitation has also been limited, extremely limited. And then the long-term care ombudsman, who would advocate on behalf of an older resident in a nursing home, have their visits are prohibited as well. So there are fewer eyes on those facilities. It is. And that kind of lack of oversight is somewhat alarming to us. And to just give blanket immunity to those facilities without having taken into consideration some of those unique circumstances of people living in long-term care facilities. I mean, it's not like they have a choice, Don, that's their home. And as a general rule, particularly during the pandemic, they're not leaving their home. And so somebody is bringing it in. And again, we understand that there may be circumstances beyond that facility's control, but we've had some bad actors too.
Right. And I think to your point, the blanket immunity is a real problem. We're not even going to look at this, and no matter what the situation, we're granting immunity. That just seems, from what I've seen from you guys have put out, a little too much.
January of 2020, we didn't have our first confirmed case in West Virginia until the end of March or late March of 2020. And there's no sunset provision in the legislation right now. So it will never expire, even when the emergency orders end, when we're hopefully past the pandemic, those restrictions on lawsuits are going to stay in place.
Right. Now, Gaylene, that make one of the things about that bill, those two bills in particular, make you somewhat unique. You are one of the few people that have testified already. You have worked with the Senate Judiciary Committee to express your opinions. I know I have testified, other people do, but so far this session, there haven't been as many as normal. And there are some people testifying in person, some by Zoom. What's been your experience, and what do you think of the situation so far in terms of being an advocate and being able to communicate with legislators?
Yeah, so access is obviously an issue. I personally appreciate the attention to health and safety, and I think that we should use the technology when we can. I think the application has been somewhat uneven. I had a great experience working with the Senate Judiciary Committee in terms of set the link and being recognized and being able to provide my testimony in a safe manner from the comfort of my own home. But I don't know that that's the case, and I think there should be some consistency to how testimony is provided. And if folks feel the need to be there in person, you could make that choice. Personally, I would choose not to make that choice, but there ought to be that option that we could do it in person, or if I didn't want to be in person, I could do it via electronic transmissions.
Yeah, I know from the Press Association's point of view, we would like to see standard rules and procedures for every committee on both sides, so that for the public, you can deal with it and not have to know special rules for this committee or that committee. Well, Gaylene, I certainly appreciate your time today. It's unusual not to be at the Capitol. You and I are usually both down there for the session, and not to see those red coats from your volunteers. How is your volunteer group holding up now that they're not at the Capitol? Are they active? How do you engage your volunteers now?
Right. So the word of 2020 was pivot, right? And being flexible and nimble. And I will tell you that our volunteer team has stepped up to the plate. They've been participating in virtual meetings when we go over our issues, and we've provided them with, again, the training and education and tips and tools that they need to be successful. And they're reaching out to lawmakers via email, text messages, phone calls, and we're scheduling Zoom meetings with lawmakers to, again, get in front of them and make sure that our priorities are understood, and trying to gain champions and supporters. So, again, I think they've done a great job. I know if under different circumstances, they would definitely want to be at the Capitol, and we would want them there. But because of COVID, we're not going to do that.
Okay, well, Gaylene, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And this
Thank
is
you, Dawn.
Dawn Smith with West Virginia Press, talking with Gaylene Miller from AARP West Virginia.